Okay, hi everyone, I'm Colleen Mckenzie. I work at the AI Objectives Institute. As I mentioned before, we are a multidisciplinary approach to aligning AI and other systems, a small research think tank, and I am here to talk about scaling deliberation beyond just looking at preferences about outcomes. So this is important because if you're aligning a particular system, you have to know what you're aligning it to, and that means that you have to know about the needs and wants of the stakeholders and the people affected by whatever the system is doing. Unfortunately, that's a little bit difficult. So in this talk, I'm going to first blow through scratching the surface of some social choice theory to set the stage for why deliberation is a good idea in the first place, and talk about a tool that we're building that maybe makes some first steps towards scaling it. Okay, problem number one, people change their minds. Sometimes people change their minds in response to information they maybe could have gotten before a particular decision went to a vote, as we're seeing play out on the international stage right now with Brexit. Even when you're dealing with static preferences, there are a number of dilemmas and theorems about how preferences don't always point to a clear winner. So the discursive dilemma is basically about, depending on the questions you ask as input to a final decision, you can get different answers just going with majority rule. For example, looking at a particular legal case where a defendant maybe did something, maybe was obligated not to do it. If you take majority votes of those 2 points, you might get a different majority decision than if you poll people on the final outcome. So the questions you ask are important. Similarly, cyclical preferences, whenever you're dealing with a set of more than 2 options and you're using something like ranked choice voting, you can get cycles of preferences where it's not clear that there is one clear winner for the entire population because people rank things in different orders. Okay, so these are some problems. Some of these problems can at least be mitigated by getting people to discuss the reasoning behind their decisions and the information that they're going on before they actually come to a vote. And that is deliberation. The definition of deliberation I'm using here really quickly is citizens addressing public problems by reasoning together about how best to solve them. This is from Joshua Cohen, who's written a bunch on this. And there are a bunch of upsides to using deliberation. People understand what other people think in the first place, which is great. They understand the variety of views. They can contextualize their own preferences in that context. And also they can dig a little bit deeper into the reasons people have for choosing those other views, the different values and principles that might actually be in conflict that lead to conflicts in outcomes. Okay, unfortunately, it doesn't really scale. At least people in a room talking to each other doesn't. There's a combinatorial explosion of perspectives put in contact with each other when you have more and more perspectives at play. And there are some ways to mitigate this too by, for example, taking representative samples and having them deliberate, or doing a sort of fractal republic structure where certain deliberative groups send representatives to other deliberative groups. But all of these have downsides, and all of them move away from decentralized decision processes. The downsides to representative samples are that people who are not engaged in the process don't have an opportunity to change their mind while in contact with others' opinions. In the Republic example, sending a representative up empowers that person more than the rest of the people that were in their group. There are some downsides. So, can technology help? I think it can. You probably also think it can if you're at this conference. And the AI Objectives Institute is taking a couple of first steps to get there. So first, this is an oversimplified flowchart about what deliberative processes look like. You figure out what people want, you organize them into groups, you do the deliberation, and then you aggregate preference at the end through voting or something. And right now, technology does a great job of scaling the first and the last parts of this process, but it kind of misses out on the stuff in the middle, in part because it's much more straightforward to represent preferences over outcomes than it is to represent the reasoning behind those preferences at scale. Okay, so our thing is called Talk to the City. It's not going to solve American politics. It's maybe going to help some things scale. We'll see. And I'm going to show you a demo in a second. But really quickly, the way that it works is it takes large volumes of data, kind of any type, unstructured text. We've used polis surveys. We've used tweets. Uses an LLM to cluster it, makes a visual representation of those clusters, and then also focuses on extracting norms and principles and not just people's final opinions to create those clusters to kind of surface that information. And then we stick a chatbot on it. So let me see if that page has loaded. Not that one. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So this is Talk to the City. This is clustering based on some polling we did in Bowling Green with Polis. You can see that these clusters, the coloring doesn't show up great here, but they are color-coded to show differences in opinion. Each of those clusters shows up here on the right, and then even within that, there are color-coded subclusters. And then you can click on any of these specific points of view and chat with that part of the city using an LLM to represent what the central tendency of that cluster is. And it's a little verbose, but it actually does a pretty decent job of representing whatever was aggregated into that particular group. Okay, so that's Talk to the City. That was Talk to the City. We have some ideas for where to go with this, and I'd love to hear more of yours after at our next break, I guess. So going through these one by one, crux identification and clustering of compatible views. Right now we're clustering similar views, but what we could also do is see which views are not mutually exclusive and actually could be compatible and appealing to the same group of people. The converse of that would be finding cruxes of viewpoints that really deeply conflict, like people are not going to be able to come to a conclusion there without figuring out what the crux of the difference of opinion is, and coming up with test cases to help people understand this. Okay, we're good. Then also capturing the way that people's preferences change. This is really the key part of how we think that Talk to the City could help this be a deliberative process. If people, use the chatbot to understand what other people are thinking and then describe how their opinions change, we can actually get an evolution of how a group's opinions are changing over time in a way that we can't with in-person collective processes right now because we don't have that documentation. And so maybe those are a couple first steps towards group organization and discursive reflection at scale. That's all I've got. Thank you very much. Come talk to me if you want to collaborate or have more ideas.
Cool. We do have a minute for questions in case anyone has any.
Oh my God, I wasn't over time. Thank you, Allison. Questions? Yeah.
Oh yeah, we have a few actually.
How distinct are these clusters? I mean, what's the meaning of the distance? What's the meaning of the distance between the clusters?
Let's see. I don't know what the short answer is. The long answer is I can point you to the algorithms we're using. But basically, this is a representation of the embedding space that we put people's opinions into. It's all semantic. It's basically fancy topic modeling.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you so much, Colleen.